Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from AnthonysCustoms, and for this review, we are looking at Figma's EX042 Deadpool. This is the DX version, so it has all that Figma could offer for their Deadpool figure. There is a regular version, it's a little bit less expensive, comes with fewer accessories, but the figure itself, the core figure, is the same, so this will be helpful for everybody out there. And I know many people out there are very excited for this figure, and, well, let's just go ahead and take it off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about 15 3/4 centimeters, just shy of 16 centimeters, which makes him just about 6 1/4 inches, pretty close to that. And, well, let's just a little bit of history on Figma's regular anatomy. They're great for anime characters. They do a great job almost all the time. And when they try to make more realistic looking figures, well, let's just say we get things that don't look great. And this is somewhere in the middle of that. They seem to have really just destroyed the proportions of this figure. And then there are other issues too. There are good things, don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about all of it, so you guys have all the information you need to decide if you want to buy this expensive figure. It's not mostly good, though. Let me just put it that way. Before we get into that, though, I know many of you are going to want a comparison between this guy, which... Oh, man. I haven't looked at this Revoltech Deadpool in a long time, and it brings a smile to my face because it is just so horribly done. It's so bad, and I know that's going to upset people, but I'm sorry. These are the facts. These are the two Deadpool figures we have. The best high-end Deadpool figures we have of this variety, and neither of them look like they're supposed to at all. This barely looks human, and this looks like some kind of Cartoon Network stylization. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to it, guys. We'll talk about that at the end, because I know people are wondering, well, which one should I buy if I want to buy one? And we'll talk about that at the end. So let's go ahead and talk about the accessories for this guy. The first of which, we have some interchangeable faces. We have the normal face that comes on him in the package. We have one face where his eyes are kind of curled up and he looks like he's probably smiling. We have one face where he has one big eye and one eye squinting. And then since this is the DX version, we have a whole alternate head where his mask is lifted up and you can see his burnt up face or melted up face or whatever you want to call it. And it looks like he's chewing on something. So we have those options. Now, before I go into anything else, I want to point out that these faces don't fit on the figure, on the head properly. This gap is always there. You can't get rid of that. So there's a giant hole or a giant crack or seam in his head all the time. And the nice thing about this guy is the head doesn't stay on for mine, or the face doesn't stay on, because this black tab that's in here is supposed to be glued in. It's not glued in. So when I try to pull it off to swap out the faces, it doesn't work. It just falls out all the time, and that's a problem. You don't want the face of your figure falling off all the time. It's supposed to stay in there, and then the faces swap out like this. But this is what happens. And so that's what happens. That's not good. That is not good. That's the kind of thing you get from like dollar store toys. Look at that. I just moved the torso and it fell out. How? How is that okay? That's so annoying. Anyway, moving on. We have a whole bunch of different hands. Like I said, there are good things about this figure. It's not all bad, but the bad things are pretty egregious. So the hands, we have 2 fist hands that come on him in the package. We have 2 wide open hands, 2 sword or knife gripping hands, 2 gun gripping hands, 2 secondary gun hands. Then we have 3 style pose hands, including a pointing finger, a cowabunga type thing, a thumbs up, and then we have another gripping hand for holding his burrito and or, I guess you wouldn't eat a chimichanga or an enchilada by hand, would you? I don't think you would. Anyway, doesn't have any detail. Marvel Legends give us more detail on their food accessories for Deadpool than the Figma. So there's that. We, of course, have his sword Scabbards. So let's talk about those. We're going to talk about those instead of just showing a photo. Cool thing about these is that they actually do have a peg that holds them together. So you can adjust them however you want to, which will be really helpful for posing. So that's awesome. And if you really want to, you can even separate them and just put one on his back. So that's really cool. These do not actually house the swords though. These are just little handles that you can remove so that it looks like he's unsheathed his sword, and then we get regular swords. So that's pretty nice. And then the swords are done really well. The handles are painted well. The blades are painted well. We do have a really nicely done knife, and then 2 sais, which is cool. And then we have some guns, which I have to go back to the video for, because this is a good thing, I think. This is okay. We have the guns on his body, in their holsters. But like Hasbro, they are not functional guns. Luckily, they've made it so that you can just remove these guns like that. It's a little weird that the strap comes with the gun, but you can remove the guns. Same thing on this side. And then you get the 2 guns as actual individual accessories, which he can hold. And that's very nice. The guns, however, have no paint on them other than the one color that they're made out of, which is either darker gunmetal or silver. No detail paintwork, which that's not good. We have these 2 rifle-y type, shotgun-y type futuristic weapons, which are sculpted really nicely, but again, no paintwork. It's just all one solid color. What the heck? And then we have some alternate legs and a crotch piece. So that's part of the DX version as well. There are other things were too, but you can check that. But like I said, this is the DX version. So you can swap out the crotch piece. Let's go ahead and pop off the legs individually. I was hoping they would come off at the same time, but we'll talk about the hip. There goes the face again. We'll talk about the hips more as we get to the articulation, because they are loose in one direction, and I've been told by my friend who has this figure that once you start taking them on and off, why won't it come off now? That they become loose, more and more loose. So you do that. You pop that off. All right, and we'll talk about the articulation for this part right now. We have our standard Figma 3-way ball peg. Big ball peg in the torso, that's good. And then our hip ball pegs, and that's fine. We have a floating belt piece. I mean, it's kind of connected, but it's essentially floating, so that's fine. So then you just swap on your different crotch piece, and then you can swap on your legs. I'm not going to go ahead and do the whole thing. You guys get the idea. You can swap on the legs, and then you swap on the boots. And there you go. So that's fine. And then the legs, they're done well enough. The shorts are molded in white with the pink hearts painted on, and then the legs are this kind of really nasty-looking grayish skin tone with the details painted in, and it's done well enough, except the knee plastic for the joint is a totally different material. I mean, obviously it's a different material, but it's a totally different color too, so it's very ugly. And then lastly, for accessories, we have the display stand, which is nice. And it's nice that Figma gives us a display stand with every figure. All right, so now we can get back into the meat and taters of this review. The paint job on this guy is... the line work is clean, no doubt about it. The black to red transitions are very well done. The silver is done nicely. The harnesses are all separate pieces, so they're done well enough, except they're a very pale color, which is not a big deal. That's fine, but just in comparison, this guy's got dark brown, this guy's got light brown, which is accurate. I don't know, maybe they're different in the comics. But he does have the dark brown straps on his lower leg, so that's it's a little strange that everything is one color except that, but that's not a huge deal. It's worth noting these little holster pieces love to pop off and not stay with the guns when they're supposed to. And they're kind of a pain in the butt. So you may want to glue that. I don't know if it's supposed to be glued, but that's a thing. Okay, so is there shading? Yes, there's a little bit of shading on the red, and that's fine. It's kind of like the entire chest is just shaded and the entire abdominal section is just shaded though, so it's not the best looking shading, but it's okay. For the elbows, we have two-tone elbow joints, bright red and kind of a dull red, and neither of them match the red of the suit, so that's not great. Not a good thing. And then, I don't understand what the problem is. The Revoltech guy had a lot of gloss and then a lot of matte. You can see parts of him are super glossy and then parts of him are not. It's not as bad for this guy, but it is still bad. Like, his arms and legs are fairly glossy black, and then the torso, completely matte, or at most satin, but it definitely isn't glossy at all. Shoulders are very glossy. The red is a little bit more uniform, so that's okay. It's just not a particularly appealing finish. It's weird. It's very weird. And then the anatomy again. He's got a super long torso, and just in case you don't believe me, I'll put an image up on the screen so you can compare what this guy looks like to what he's supposed to look like. Very, very long torso, low set hips, short legs, relatively speaking, long neck, just super weird proportions. That does not look like Deadpool. It's very weird. So now let's talk about the articulation, because it only gets better from here. It's sarcasm. We have a hinged ball peg for the head on top of the neck, which is fine. It's okay for as far as Figma's work. That's pretty much standard. It's not one of those crazy offset ones, so it works pretty normally. I still think a double ball peg is better, and it would be, because it doesn't require twisting around to pose things. You can just move it. But it does have good range, so that's fine. And then for the neck, we actually have the same type of joint in there. So the neck is on a big hinge. I'm leaving it off. The neck is on a big hinge, and that's okay if you want to pose him with the neck moving a whole lot. And then it doesn't really rotate so much because of how it's seated in between the shoulders. So you don't really get too much out of it. For the shoulders, it's a standard Figma ball peg, so it goes into the torso with a ball peg, and then we have the hinge and the straight peg going into the arm. So it functions like a standard elbow or standard shoulder, and you get decent range out of it going out to the side, and then you can bring it forward and rotate it around. But you still have this weird gapping in here, which is just totally not necessary because you don't even get that much range out of the ball peg. Like, you can't raise the shoulder up high enough to clear this gap. There's a big gap in there, and it's just always there. It's a very, very ugly shoulder design. And when you move the arm, it tucks this strap into the armpit. Like, it's just gone. And it's kind of like perpetually there, even when you put the arm straight down. The straps go like underneath the shoulder joint. So that's not a good design at all. You do get your bicep swivel out of that, but it's fairly limited because it's all connected to one piece and not well designed. I do like the fact that the red here is actually a separate piece of plastic to the black so that there's no issue with the paint. That's pretty cool. Single jointed elbows, kind of. We have the same type of joint in the elbow that we had in the neck, so there's actually a ball peg in the forearm, which lets the arm move around a little bit. It's kind of just going to give you a swivel, though, because as you can see, there's not really any clearance for it to move around. So it's pretty much just a slightly different single jointed elbow, which is not the best looking in the world. It's far better than what Revoltech normally does, but it's still pretty ugly. And then for the wrists, we have a separate little piece right at the end here. This strap is a separate piece, so it kind of just floats around and hides the ball hinge for the wrist, which works well enough. For the torso, we have a same type of joint again, actually. It leans back pretty well. It leans forward a little bit, and then it kind of leans at an angle side to side, and it rotates around. And the reason it does that is because it's an offset. The way it pegs into this part is at an angle, so it kind of limits what you can do. And then, of course, like I said, you have your ball peg and your hinge in here. Now, the interesting design is it looks like a standard ab crunch, and it kind of is, but it doesn't really give you much range. It just leans a little bit, and it would have been much better just to use another ball peg or double ball peg, because you don't really get that much out of it. It has almost no range, and it extended that torso significantly. And how that works is this part is just a floating piece that tucks in, and you have just a little hinge in here, which doesn't really do much. I don't really get why they bothered to do that. And then that three-way ball peg is what pegs into the bottom of this, so that's why this whole thing moves around a little bit. But this hinge is just, it's very strange that you can see it has better range on the ball peg than it does using the actual hinge. It's just weird that they come up with new ideas to articulate things that don't need to be changed, and then it ends up being not as good. So the hips are on their standard sockets, like you saw. We saw the three-way ball peg, and then of course the thigh can rotate around that, but you actually pretty much get your thigh swivel out of that ball peg, which is fine, but you can notice that the hips are particularly loose going side to side. And as you swap those in and out for the alternate pieces, that's going to become more loose. So be aware of that. They're not particularly loose going forward and back, but they're not particularly stiff. So you may end up with some issues. So be aware of that. For the knees, it's a single jointed knee, which isn't too bad. It works fine. It looks okay. No problems there. Like I said before, the boots come off so you can swap on the alternate legs. For the ankles, we have the same type of joint again as everywhere else. It's a hinge with a ball peg in the lower foot, so you can kind of move the foot around on that joint so that you get a little bit better range. And you do get decent range, but they use the worst kind of plastic ever right here. This is terrible, terrible. And mine's glued on crooked, so it looks particularly bad. On this side, it's okay, but it's still, that's a weird plastic to use, and it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't help that much. I think they probably could have done a better plastic. Toe hinge works nicely, though. It's nice and flush and works well, so that's good. Ankle rocker works just fine, so that's good. Like I said, the figure's not terrible. It's not absolutely 100% bad. It's just like 80% bad. So if you like 20% good for your money, then this is the way to go. It's so disproportionate and so poorly executed on so many levels. It's disappointing. I'm not even done yet, though. We have to talk about this, the gun holster thingy. it does get in the way when you're posing. So they've put it on this relatively extended ball peg, and the whole thing just moves around. Like, the straps don't connect to anything. It's just dumb looking. As you pose him, you're going to end up with stuff just sticking out all over the place. It's not good. It's not good. And this one rotates around, which is fine. And here's the other thing. I don't know about this because I'd have to check every single Deadpool comic ever, at least the Marvel Now ones. This, I don't think, is an accurate design because the Revoltech one matches the Marvel Legends one with the layout for the harnesses and holsters and things. God, this little piece is annoying. So yeah, the Marvel Legends and the Revoltech one match, and then this one's totally different. It doesn't have the upside down ammo pouches. It doesn't have stuff in the same places. So I don't know if this is inaccurate or just based on a different design. You guys are gonna have to decide that for yourself. But it's slightly more appealing than this guy, because as you can see, this guy's built like a gorilla and barely looks human at all with a tiny little head, and you know the problems. We've been over that. But this guy looks like a little kid's cartoon version of Deadpool, and just a whole bunch of bad engineering, and the faces don't fit. Mine is particularly bad because the faces fall off all the time, but they don't fit anyway. There's just so much wrong with it that it's like, don't bother buying it. Why? I mean, you might as well just get a Marvel Legends figure. It's going to be probably as enjoyable to own. So, and you guys know I wasn't particularly fond of that figure, but that's per Marvel Legends standards. For $20, you might as well just go that route and spending, what, 50, 60, 80? I don't know what this costs anymore. It's been a long time since I paid for it, but I can't recommend either of these over the other one. They're both equally bad for what they should be. This one at least knows what it wants to be. That's what I said in the review for this guy. It's not trying to be an accurate figure, so it's trying to be what it is. So if you like that, then go for this. I mean, Revoltech gets the tip of the hat for that. For this, it's trying to be a regular Deadpool, and it's not. So that's my verdict. I wouldn't buy it, honestly, and if I could return it, I would, but I can't because I bought it from overseas. So I'm stuck with it. So yeah, I don't really recommend either one of them, but I guess if you had to pick one, at least Revoltech knows what it wants to be. That's my final verdict. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and in the meantime, keep collecting.